Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm Sarah Watt.
And I'm William Chen.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection in between. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. For this month, though, we are kind of changing it up a little bit. We will be discussing Black Panther, which came out this year, and we thought superhero films are so prevalent in today's cinematic landscape that rather than comparing Black Panther to one film, we would compare it to every superhero film of the last 30, 40, whatever many years.
Ever made.
Millennia, yeah.
And I think this has been motivated by the fact that there is a great significance about Black Panther in what it represents to pop culture, but also to society at large. And we want to compare it to films like Wonder Woman with a similar sort of edge, but also, superhero films in general and what that's kind of meant for our films. So, William, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of Black Panther?
Of course. So Black Panther is directed by Ryan Coogler, a Wunderkind of the day. And it is about a king, a newly appointed king, T'Challa, who after the events of Captain America 3, Civil War, returns to his kingdom to take up the throne amidst political turmoil and a question about what it means to be a king and a leader in his country.
Excellent. And I don't really know what more else we need to say about every other film, superhero film made, because I'm going to jump right in. For me, the biggest issues that I have with Black Panther are because it feels like every other superhero film ever made in a lot of ways. Apart from those tropes, I loved it.
Which is really funny because a lot of people say, no, it doesn't feel like a lot of superhero films. But I do agree with you, Jeremy. I think the one thing that stood out to me was, man, this is just a Marvel film. The comedic tropes are the same. The characters, are pretty well fleshed out, but they're still very samey. And the overall conflict it's rooted in something really, really interesting. But it feels like the movie doesn't really want to go that direction.
Yeah. Can we have a spoiler-filled discussion?
Yes, I think we should.
Yes.
Because I think anyone who's interested in listening to us has seen it before.
I think so. And so this is your spoiler warning right now. If you do not want spoilers from Black Panther and you haven't seen it, turn off this podcast and revisit us once you've listened to it. Because, I want to jump into that. I feel that the film does a lot for black representation, and it's really thrilling to see a wealth of black characters fully kind of realised. But there has been a lot of criticism around the representation of the black urban male in the Michael B. Jordan character of, I know his last name's Killmonger. Is it Eric? Yeah. Eric Killmonger or something like that.
Well, Killmonger's his nickname he got in the army.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes, Eric.
His villain name. Because I feel like you've got this really complex character. He's woven into the story of Black Panther like a good villain should be. He has great potential for redemption and for reconciliation, and for them to be able to work with this kind of mythical African pride, homeland, but then also this kind of image of broken urban black identity. But the fact that he dies at the end, and that's the spoiler, the fact that he chooses to die, he has the choice to live. They're trying to make a statement, but it's pretty dire. And I just thought there was an opportunity to keep him alive. And also there's the criticism that most other Marvel villains have survived like their films. Why does the black one have to die?
Because he was so awesome.
I'm wary of people saying, "Oh, why does the black one have to die?" But I mean, I hear you. I feel as though there was. I too have read criticism of the criticism by black commentators about the fact that Black Panther didn't do enough. It went so far but didn't do enough. And my instinct on reading those sorts of articles was, I'm not black, but I am a woman, and Wonder Woman was meaningful to me in surprising and unexpected ways. Particularly as a woman and a film lover who traditionally loves the sorts of films that boys like. In my top 10 is, with the exception perhaps of The Sound of Music, God bless it, is riddled with Godfathers and Goodfellas and Reservoir Dogs is. So Wonder Woman was unexpectedly moving and wonderful for me. And I'm not prepared to say, yeah, but it didn't do everything right for women and solved it all in one fell swoop, because progress was still made. And I don't think it's unfair to say Black Panther made extraordinary leaps, not just in its casting of, I think there were like 3 white people in the whole film.
Can I just add a bit? I read somewhere a very clever commentator on Twitter said that the 2 main white characters were the Tolkien white guys.
Well, that's nice.
Such a lovely
Because
pun.
I did think how cute that it is. It's basically, they were the, Bilbo and, I guess he was Schmeagol at the time. That's right. That scene in the last Hobbit movie was absolutely a highlight. So there was something quite cute about, that's right. But, and I believe that obviously if we remember as well that the white guard in the museum in London, right at the very beginning, before Michael B. Jordan poisons her coffee or whatever it was that happened. But I mean, apart from that, extraordinary to have so many black actors rather, on screen all at once. And I'm not suggesting that's enough. So you've had your lot now, so now we'll get back to making white people movies. I don't mean that at all, but I still think it was more than just tokenistic,
Yeah, and I agree with you. Despite my coming out the gate with the criticism, I just felt natural to lead on from what we were talking about then. But yeah, that's true. And you actually came up in a conversation I had with a friend of mine who said to me, after she said to me, "Have you seen Black Panther yet, Jeremy?" And I said, "No, I've been meaning to, blah, blah, blah." And she goes, "Look, it made me proud to be African, and I've never been that proud of my African heritage." And I thought, wow, what an incredible endorsement of this film. And I said to her, that reminds me of my friend Sarah, who had a similar response to Wonder Woman as a woman. And my friend who was a woman is a woman as well. She agreed that Wonder Woman had that same kind of rousing, feeling. And so, yeah, I think it's significant that it has this great pride about it.
I think the African comment is really interesting, because the thing that struck me the most about Black Panther was the African accents. I thought how marvellous that this isn't just a film with a whole lot of African American sounding actors in it, but the fact that people went back to, African roots with their accents and everything, and none of it felt like racist or a bit hokum, because it seemed appropriate, but I thought really unusual, because apart from, and here's my ignorance about to be demonstrated, but I mean, apart from District 9 perhaps, I don't even know, did anyone in District 9 actually sound... So the lead guy sounds South African. They all sound
super
fine.
African.
But apart from that, and obviously those dreadful white colonial films that are sort of, set back in the olden days of Africa.
Zulu.
Yeah, right, and out of Africa and whatnot, you don't really hear African accents on in the movies. And for a mainstream superhero flick, I thought that was just bloody great. I love that.
And you mentioned the great characters, but also the actors. I just was sitting there, like, I didn't really look too much into the cast. And I was sitting there, and there was just great actor after great actor kept popping up on the screen.
Yeah, and bit roles and big roles all over the place. Yeah.
It was really thrilling. I mean, when Daniel Kaluuya came on screen, I actually didn't even recognise him because he was so different to Get Out.
Yeah.
Which actually made me... we're having a discussion in our last podcast about whether or not he deserved that nomination, and we kind of came to the consensus...
For Best Actor for Get Out.
For Get Out, we came to the consensus that, he's doing some really lovely work here. And I was one of the key people that brought that topic up. And I felt a little bit, not ashamed, but I felt like I changed my mind a bit, that actually to see him in such a vastly different role.
And really acting, as you say, the antithesis of the nice guy that we've sort of become used to with his Chris character. Yeah, that's right.
Very different.
Yeah.
And I love Danae, what's her name? Danae... Garai.
From Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
She plays such a different character in The Walking Dead. She plays very staunch...
Danae Gurira.
Yeah. She plays the staunch samurai sword wielding Michonne, and then to see this woman with a great sense of humour. Actually, the sense of humour that the characters have is also to be commended. They're complex, but they're not that. What's the character in Guardians of the Galaxy?
Star-Lord?
No. The one that has no sense of humour.
Oh, Drax. Yeah.
No. The woman, the one woman character.
Oh, Gamora.
She's just like this.
The stick in the mud.
Oh, it's just terrible.
I thought you meant Drax, who the joke is he doesn't have a sense of humour.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't like this.
I do like the humour in Black Panther in that it's not very comic booky. Like it feels very much character based and naturally flows from the situation or from the relationships. Like a lot of the scenes between T'Challa and his sister, Letitia Wright is so good. She's like my favorite character in this movie.
Same, absolutely, yeah.
She just kills it on screen.
Yeah, totally.
But it just, their relationship feels very, like teasing siblings, and it doesn't need to dig much deeper than that, but just the characters bring it to life, and I think every major relationship feels that way. It just feels lived in these roles.
And there's some really, like, going back to the Danae Guerrero, is it? She's got this relationship with Daniel Kaluuya, but it's doesn't really define her. Then you've got Lupita Nyong'o's character, who is the love interest, but again, it's like they could not be together in the next film and that would be fine. And the sister,
she's a love interest who's not just the voice of conscience.
No.
She actually gets to do stuff and affect the story,
and isn't just waiting around to be chosen at the end. Or sacrificed or anything. Oh, look, goodness. I mean, if I'm suddenly visualizing sort of steps of progress, and I feel as though we've been sort of banged around the head by superhero movies with a majority white male cast, sometimes some interesting ethnicities, a token woman. I mean, Black Widow, you're having a laugh. Good Lord,
Have you seen that? There's a Saturday Night Live clip where they do the Black Widow movie, and the joke is that it's actually just a romantic comedy with all the characters from Avengers.
For crying out loud! And then all of a sudden we get Wonder Woman, and we're like, oh look, women can be powerful, and you can do a Bechdel test on a superhero movie, and it'll pass. And then we get Black Panther, where not only is there representation or people of colour, but then all the women also have really strong roles. I just think is marvellous. Thank heavens we don't. Am I just going to use? I shouldn't keep saying marvellous because it sort of belies my favouriting Marvel over DC, and that's not true. But
distinguished competition.
That's right. But I do think it's so wonderful that. Actually, suddenly the Black Panther movie proves actually you can do all of it.
It is super cool. I absolutely agree with you, Sarah. Especially when you compare Black Panther to a movie like Justice League, where Wonder Woman is she's a supporting character at best, I would say. Like, everything they did great in Wonder Woman, they just squander in that stupid movie. Whereas Black Panther, there's a lot of times when T'Challa, he's not even on screen. He's reported dead for not half a movie, at least I would say 15, 20 minutes. And then during that time, you have predominantly women being the main characters and driving the story forward, and Martin Freeman's kind of the tag-along. And that's awesome. That's so cool.
And also, you've got them not all, they're not driven by the same thing. You've got them disagreeing with each other. Some of them staying, some of them going. There's great complexity in their stories. It's really,
the costumes are really appropriate, and I think that has to be mentioned. And if I can just make a very quick sort of digression, the new Lara Croft movie. I've seen it, and it's not amazing, but it has some fantastic things about it, but it's not amazing overall. But I really do appreciate Alicia Vikander looking like she does in the film. She can't help but be beautiful. I'm never going to blame her for that, and she's a pleasure to look at. But the wonderful thing about her physique and what they clothe her in is it is not overtly sexy. She doesn't have overinflated boobs and a tiny waist, and I understand the tropes of the Lara Croft video game character and blah, blah, blah. It's refreshing to see a woman kick ass and not have her ass hanging out of a tiny little bikini while she's doing it. You know what I mean?
Just like Suicide Squad, man, going back to DC.
Which I didn't see.
Bad.
I haven't seen
it. No.
I've actually given up on DC, not because of DC content. I mean, Batman's my favourite, and his villains are actually, I love his villains more than the character himself. But I've just been so disappointed with. Zack Snyder is so boring as a director, and I'm sick of the films anyway, the superhero films. To then have one that I have to labour through, it's just awful. I very rarely consider leaving a film, and Man of Steel was on the verge.
A low point for you, huh?
It really was, and there's a lot of good things going for that movie, but my gosh, no film needs to be 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Have I told you guys about my Man of Steel story? Okay.
I'm not sure.
So I went to see Man of Steel with my good movie friends in the States, and we went to a midnight screening. Little did I know that with trailers, the movie was over 3 hours long.
Oh my
So we ended up leaving the cinema. It was like 3:20 in the morning, and because the final hour of that stupid movie is just, I don't know, synapses firing destruction. I ended up with the worst migraine I've ever had in my life and went through the entire night until morning. Just, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what a film.
Terrible experience.
Well, let's compare it to some other films. I mean, one of my favourite superhero films, not so much because it's a brilliant film, but because of the significance it holds for me, is the original X-Men film of 2000.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's 2000. So Bryan Singer, who is a name that I don't usually like saying anymore.
No.
But yeah, that X-Men film, it was the first time that I can remember seeing a lived-in world. I mean, you had the Batman films from Tim Burton, which are fantastic, particularly Batman Returns. But they are a Tim Burton expressionist world.
Yes.
But X-Men, you know, the Rogue and the Wolverine characters, who are the centre of that film, are real people. And you almost aren't even aware that it's a superhero film until sort of much later as the film progresses. But yeah, I feel like that's the film that kind of started our superhero, or the resurgence. Yeah, because you had Superman, didn't you, in the 70s, and Batman in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, it was X-Men.
And then I agree with that as well, Jeremy. Like the movies after X-Men, Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man was big.
They have the same qualities, right? They take place in the real that feels comfortably like our own, with people who just happen to be bestowed upon with, superpowers. But they are relatable, and they could be you and I. That's the fantasy, right?
Yeah.
Well, certainly that Peter Parker could, right? That's the point.
And the X-Men, Anna Paquin at the start, she's just a girl with a dream, and then she's given the gift of killing people who touch her.
For me, because superhero movies are not my favourite genre, and I have, with recent years, when we've had more and more of them, I've become a little bit inured and certainly less excited. The ones that are either origin stories or are the first of a new set, if you will, that have a freshness about them, they're the ones that I like the best. And I always think, you'll never have again the first time of seeing the band get together. And so, I loved X-Men First Class because I loved going back and seeing them all grow up and then come together. That was great. But chuck me in on a number 3 or a number 5 or a whatever, and I'm like, not so bothered. You know what I mean? It's got to have something else to really thrill me.
One of my greatest superhero film experiences, and not so much just watching the film, but the whole realization that this was happening, was X-Men Days of Future Past. And the reason for that is because that third film, these characters that I loved, celebrated as the end of the trilogy. Half of them were killed off or cured or just evicted from the story. Yeah. And it was such
like Rogue, who appears for one scene.
It's just depressing. No, I'm talking about
X3. Yeah,
X3. Yeah. Well, she cures herself. And I just was so disappointed. But then to have the end of the Wolverine film where he's in Japan with a hint that Xavier and Magneto are coming back, and then to have a time travel film where they combine this new cast of the reboot with the old cast to kind of heal the wounds of before.
You like all that?
Plus, time travel I'm a sucker for anyway.
Yeah.
And it's set in the 70s, which is my favourite era ever.
Yeah, right.
That just had me fizzing. So... yeah, that was talking about a 7th or an 8th or whatever. 6th or whatever it was. That was a high point for me.
Because I got to be honest with you, I'm not instinctively excited about Wonder Woman 2 because we've had maybe it's not technically an origin story. I don't know, but for me it is. So we've had that now, and we've had that. I love. I love the trope in the superhero genre where they leave their fantasy world, or rather it's their reality, but do you know what I mean? It's fantastical to us. And for example, in Black Panther, where suddenly we're situated back in Oakland, then for me personally, as you alluded to earlier, William, this is the real world, these are real people, but there's this wonderful sort of super heroic element that's infiltrated that real world. But with Black Panther, actually, that said, I'm surprised how much I really enjoyed Wakanda.
Yeah.
Given that I'm not massively into world building in a fantastical sort of way, but it was wonderful and beautiful and the music was incredible, and
So cool.
the movement and the fighting and it was, and the costuming and everything was
the colours,
just magnificent.
You can have a superhero movie that looks this good.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I mean, because a lot of the Marvel universe is just so sort of grey and it's all kind of the same. It's
mechanical and industrial.
Yeah, and then this is
dystopian,
lovely. And it's the same reason why I loved Thor Ragnarok, because it was just so left field. I mean, the fact that they made that film is still quite surprising to me. Which, interestingly, I saw some of the test footage, and I don't know whether it was just because it was test footage or whether Taika Waititi actually intended this, but it looks very much like Flash Gordon with 80s sort of animation style. And I wonder if that was his original plan.
I suspect it was.
To make a Flash Gordon stop animation style film, which makes sense with what they made. What they made. But it's nice in Black Panther to have something that is so much a foreign world, and I mean that in the sense of being alien and strange, not because it's in Africa, but and the world reminded me of that place in Thor Ragnarok where the Hulk is being held up. I can't even remember what that place is. Sakaar, yeah. There's something nice about seeing these films. They're kind of they're having to go a bit left field to.
There's actually a lot of similarities between the two films. I think other people have brought it up online. They're both about rulers coming back to their kingdoms after their father has died, and unbeknownst to them, a blood relative comes to challenge the throne and is bringing about death and destruction, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Is it notable? It feels to me that it is, but I'm not as well versed as the two of you in this genre. But is it notable that in Black Panther, our ostensible goodie has good intentions? I want to preserve what is amazing about my country, my kingdom, and I don't want it getting out there because I don't want them ruining it. And at the same time, you've got a villain who actually we can root for and actually agree with when he says, well, look, aren't we being selfish here? Shouldn't we be taking all this goodness out there and doing this for all of our people, not just those who are here? Is this unusual?
I love that, and that's, I think, what I was alluding to at the start of the podcast, which is I think that they had this wonderful complexity with his character, and you understood why he became the man that he became.
And you might even have agreed with him or rooted for him in some ways.
Yeah.
And you're pissed off they killed him off.
It's just kind of hopeless, isn't it? What does it say to disenfranchised urban people in the United States? It's
well, which bit? Which what?
Well,
his message.
Well, part of me, I actually cried in this film. I cried at the end when when T'Challa and Eric were on the top of that mountain and they're watching the sunrise, and I cried because it was such a symbol of African American oppression, and also this mythical pride that could be grasped onto. And I didn't realize at the time what that character dying would mean to me in terms of what the message of the film was. But I was just really touched by this symbolic representation of black identity. And then for him to die and to have all this wonderful complexity. Yeah, he says, what does he say? He says, we can fix you. Black Panther says, we can give you that magical bead or whatever it is. And he says, no, I'd much rather die than be in chains, which is a great line.
He would follow his ancestors as they jumped off the boats, which is...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a big statement. And at the time I was like, that's really impressive. But then in retrospect, I do find it problematic.
But maybe it's the thing that gives the film integrity. Maybe if the film was purely about a mythical kingdom where everything's okay...
My only issue is that he dies. I love everything else.
Right.
Everything else that he stands for and everything else that he presents. So I absolutely agree with you. A villain that you can root for is wonderful.
And where you can feel that conflict yourself, that tension between, well, actually, maybe he is right, rather than the other guy.
And a hero that's flawed. Like, you're endeared to Black Panther, but I'm like, I'm being very selfish. And I love that scene with his dad. And the Lion King scene when he's talking to his dad, Mufasa, whatever his name is. And he's like, Dad, you were wrong. It's a good lesson for today. It's like we can't just rely on our traditions. We have to diversify and to make a more equitable world.
And what about that scene where Killmonger's talking to his dad? And holy cow, that was an incredible scene where you see the Wakandan sunset, but it's outside of the window of the grimy Oakland apartment, and it's such overt symbolism of what it means to grow up as he did and to suffer as he did through all the stuff.
Michael B. Jordan, he is a force on the screen. And that's another thing, is he's physically just really powerful. All of those scars over him, and he's clearly worked out really hard for this movie. And he's just... He's got a charisma on that screen.
He does. Initially, really I was worried because he turned up at the beginning and then he disappeared for like a chunk of the film, and I was like, "Where's that other guy?" You know.
Every time Michael B. Jordan's not on screen, someone asks, "Where's Michael B. Jordan?"
Yeah. Have you guys watched The Wire?
Yes.
Yeah, I vaguely remember his character from The Wire because he looks so much younger.
Yeah.
Is he in the first season? I think he's just in the first season.
Well, he's Wallace,
which is quite a significant character, but he's
young.
Yeah. He is.
I first remember him from Chronicle, and just I think all the leads in Chronicle are awesome. Dane DeHaan, I guess, has become less awesome as time goes on.
Is he the one from Valerian?
Yes. And I think that's when he became distinctly less awesome for William, isn't it? Yeah. I didn't realise Michael B. Jordan was in Chronicle, but I do remember him from The Wire.
But, I mean, I do have an issue with the Killmonger character in that. I agree with what both of you are saying about the complexity of the villain. I just felt they could have done more with him. I felt like they really tried to make you not sympathize with him by making him super evil. And it was at that point around, the end of Act 2 where he starts, like, strangling dudes and it's like, I'm gonna kill them all. And... He could have been someone really, really sympathetic, and it could have actually been like a challenge for the audience to not root for this guy.
Yeah.
That's right, because he was so sympathetic. And instead, I felt like they really simplified it down until it was a little grotesque. And that also really bleeds out into all the stuff around the edges, right? Because I mean, from Ryan Coogler's earlier filmography, like Fruitvale Station, and to a certain extent, what's it called, Creed, where he's young, he's fierce, he's got views, man, he's got views, and you can see that around the edges of Black Panther. But to me, walking out of the movie, it really felt like the big Disney Marvel blockbuster kind of got in the way of that.
I agree with you. I think the storytelling expectations of superhero films let this film down. And I actually think that's the weakest point of Wonder Woman as well. That third act with, is it Hades? I can't even remember who she's fighting.
It's Ares.
That need to have a face off with the villain gets in the way of some of the more interesting aspects of the films.
But as you say, it always has to happen.
Yeah.
It does. How can you... They're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Oh, wait. No, Captain America 3, where that was a pretty refreshing example.
It was where they're having infighting, aren't they?
Yeah, and then the villain, his plan was never to take over the world. It was just to have something very emotional and to get emotional catharsis by putting these superheroes against each other.
One of my favourite storylines in terms of these sort of tropes is from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Season 6, where you have, Buffy returns from the dead, her friend the witch Willow brings her back, and the consequence is that Buffy was actually quite happily in a place of peace, and that her friends ripped her from that. So it becomes a big metaphor for
I can't believe
depression.
you always manage to find a correlation with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think it's quite admirable.
That's great. I don't think I brought Buffy up in a podcast yet, have I?
Oh, I assumed you had.
Oh, well, I'm claiming it. We'll claim it for the possible next time. But they set up these three nerds as the potential villains of the season, and spoiler alert for Buffy Season 6, they are pathetic, and ultimately it's the friend Willow that becomes so overwhelmed with black magic, metaphor for drug use, that she becomes the villain, and that Buffy can't kill her because she can't kill her best friend, and has to find a way to save her, and ultimately can't. Someone else ends up doing it. But yeah, just as a way of, previously every season before that there'd been the big bad, the big villain that Buffy has to face off with whatever skills she needs to use at the time. But to have this complex dynamic of a friend being the person you're fighting, which is the same as Civil War 3.
Yeah.
And I think that Black Panther, it could, I mean, they were cousins.
Yeah.
With more time or with further film development, that relationship could become something like that. But maybe they're just not really interested in doing that. Maybe that's just not what the film's trying to do. And But yeah, they had to have some kind of villain face-off at the end.
Well, what do you guys feel about the connections to other Marvel movies? Because sometimes, these connections overwhelm these movies. And sometimes they're okay, like in, Thor Ragnarok and Doctor Strange. But how was Black Panther for you guys?
What connections in what regard?
You know, Easter eggs and characters popping in and that kind of thing.
So, like Doctor Strange turning up in a couple of films, that sort of thing.
Both our Tolkien white men had been in previous films. So you had
in previous superhero films,
in previous Marvel films. So the Andy Serkis character, he was the villain in
Age of Ultron
Avengers. Yep, he pops up, and Martin Freeman is in Civil War, I believe.
So I never remember those sorts of things, unfortunately.
They're pretty minor characters.
But it's like with Easter eggs. I'm not your target market for noticing the Easter eggs either. And even though I'll stay for a credit cookie, they never mean anything to me. And everyone else in the audience is the ones going, good. And I'm like, wait, what? Have we seen that guy before? You know.
See, I'm a big fan of those credit cookies, as you say, being something that just adds to the film you've just watched. I kind of can't stand when they're teasing other stuff. It's just a cheap shot. I feel that, and I've said this before, these films are like television.
Yeah.
And a lot of our TVs now are fantastic pieces of cinema. But that, I don't have an issue with it. I just have an issue with the fact that you go along to the next episode of Marvel every year.
Yeah.
$300 million episode.
Yeah.
It's pretty cheap. It's the whole,
so what are they going to do
endeavour.
next? Just say it was up to us. And it isn't. And unfortunately, they'll roll out another one and people will pay the money and it'll be fine and it'll make money and who cares. But if it was up to us, what would be the next step on my imaginary step then of progress or kind of innovation?
For me, it's already happening. Like Logan was a massive highlight, but Damon Lindelof, and you all know I'm a massive Damon Lindelof fan, is doing The Leftovers with HBO. Sorry, not The Leftovers. That's what he's just done. Watchmen. He's doing Watchmen with HBO. Which,
Wait, you mean a series?
A TV series of Watchmen, and the book is just wonderful. It's such a rich book. It's effectively The Incredibles. Superhero people have got sick of superheroes, third generation of superheroes, and what would people who actually are superheroes, what would they be like? What sort of mental health issues
sort of like
would they have?
IRL. Well, yeah.
What's IRL?
In real life. Do you mean what would they be really like?
Yeah, so you've got ones that are either sociopaths or attention seekers or thrill junkies or there's all sorts of things. Got major daddy and mummy issues. Sex
Because Doctor Strange wasn't
a
a very nice person until he had his epiphany.
Well, but this is that when they're superheroes, they're actually acting on really dark fantasies. And that is the world better for them or is the world worse?
Yeah.
That's what Watchmen is, rich in detail and theme, and I think very relevant to our Trump America right now. So that's what's happening. So that, to me, that I'm really excited for that. And particularly because it's in television, it means that they can actually do stuff that has open ends and they can have messy conclusions, and they don't have to have the big bad fight at the end.
That would be wonderful, because that's normally where films lose me.
Oh yeah.
I imagine most people, and I am frequently watching a film and then I go, oh, this must be the third act. Okay, well, I'm trying to see my watch in the gloom, to see whether it might nearly be over, which is, I just don't understand why they keep on rolling that out.
I think because the third act is just really hard. Yeah. You can set up stuff and build up tension, but how you pay that off is hard, particularly if you're working within a genre where the tropes and the rules are so clearly defined.
What was that? Oh, right. It was 21 Jump Street, the movie version, where... do you guys? You guys?
I love that.
Right? Yeah. There's that at the end of Act 2. What's his name? Dr. Spaceman from 30 Rock. He comes on stage, talks to the camera, and is like, and that's the end of Act 2 because they're having a play on stage.
Great. I don't remember that.
No, I didn't either.
Those guys, the guys that made the Lego film, they are just geniuses, and I'm a little bit disappointed that
they got
Men in Black
Solo.
What's that?
Oh, they got fired from the Han Solo movie?
Right. No. Yeah, but that makes sense. I mean, Star Wars is turning into the new Marvel, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they were going to do a Men in Black and 21 Jump Street crossover, which is such an absurd idea that I would just love to see.
Do you like crossovers?
Not really, but that just is so ridiculous. Yeah. Who would have thought that the fourth Men in Black would also be the third 21 Jump Street?
See, I think I used to find it exciting, the notion that you might have watched a Batman film like I did. I mean, I may have said this before. I remember, because I'm a little bit old, I specifically remember when, I was going to call it Danny Elfman's Batman, actually, Tim Burton's Batman with the Danny Elfman score. I remember specifically being in fifth form and that film coming out. and I was horrifically excited for it. And looking back, I don't even know why or how I knew to be excited, but I was. So that was definitely one of my seminal moving-going moments. But it was Batman, and it was the baddies, wasn't it? It was the Joker to start with, Jack Nicholson. And so for me growing up, it was exciting for a moment there when you would have heroes from various films come together. And that was neat. And now it just feels as though that's all it is. And like Thor was less interesting to me, the Ragnarok, because it was Thor and Hulk and, bringing people together. I feel as though, for me personally, it's not as exciting anymore. It's diluting the joy or the pleasure, probably.
And I don't mean for us to keep ragging on DC movies, but I feel that that's something that DC is doing really poorly. I think at least with Marvel movies, people have said this before. They've spent their time slowly and patiently building up a stable of characters so they can cross over. Whereas DC is just crossover after crossover and characters bumping into each other with no apparent reason.
And no depth.
Yeah, no, none at all. Which is what Justice League, okay, so Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman, they had their own movie. Oh, actually, no, Batman didn't have his own movie. So Wonder Woman and Superman did. And the others were just introduced and, okay, here's some stock character traits. Let's get at them. 90 minutes. We're out.
90 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, 2 hours and a half?
Oh, not for Justice League. It's super short.
I know, but it just is film.
And so, that I think that really goes to show just how if you don't treat these characters with respect. They are, just really, they are relatively shallow pop culture characters. But even then, if you don't treat them with the modicum of respect or with the understanding of what these characters actually stand for, it just comes off as a mess.
I mean, Batman, his villains always represent an aspect of him and his darkness. I mean, there's a whole range of really deep and dark things.
And I love the Nolan Batman films,
so do
just
I.
as you do. I think those are quality movies. They don't even feel super heroic to me. They're just a movie about a dude with big issues and big kind of challenges to overcome. I love that.
Talking about a movie with a dude with big issues and superhero films, what about Glass, which is coming out, which is the third of the Unbreakable and Split series.
Oh, how funny, right.
And I actually saw the posters of Unbreakable and Split, and they both have broken glass across them. It's like, how did we miss this?
Real clever.
So
who's actually in it?
Bruce Willis,
and
Samuel
James
McAvoy, and the girl from Split.
And from The Village.
Which I'm actually really glad about because the ending of Split was very icky for me with how her character was left. With, spoiler alert for Split, with her abusive uncle. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I was
that's right.
Gross. This is icky. But that's a superhero film that you don't know is a superhero film, either of them, until
with
the
Split,
very end.
I don't think I knew it was until Bruce Willis turned up in the diner.
Well, that's the thing, you don't.
And I thought, this is and I saw it at the 24-hour movie marathon.
Oh, cool.
So it was desperately peculiar in that context as well. I mean, I don't know if it was quite middle of the night, but it was, getting on. And I was like, wait a second. And the audience that I was with on their beanbags just erupted, But I assumed it was M. Night Shyamalan being just a little bit funny.
It felt very cheeky, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really cheeky.
And
but I didn't know it was a foray into something new.
No.
The dialogue was also really, really camp. It's like, if you remember the scene, it's two ladies seeing a news report, and it's like, oh yeah, this reminds you of that incident a couple of years ago. What was his name again? And then Bruce Willis goes, Mr. Glass. And that's the black.
Just to talk about a bit more of M. Night Shyamalan, The Happening is still one of the most ridiculous cinema experiences. That whole film is dialogue like that, isn't it? Oh gosh. But I guess in terms of going back to your question about what do we hope would happen next, I haven't really asked for a third film in that. But I think that subverting of the genre is where it needs to go, which I feel Logan started to do, and I think Watchmen will continue to do it.
But why? Because they're darker and more serious, and
and the story's more interested in the meta discussion and unpacking what it means to be a superhero.
Logan did Logan. I mean, I know that we sort of tittered about the fact that it was nominated for an Oscar, but it did an incredible job, didn't it?
Phenomenal film. The more that I think about it, the more I'm just like, that was really good
and moving and well acted and took itself seriously.
Yeah,
and was R-rated, and I couldn't believe that when I was watching it, and there was claws going through cheeks
and decapitations that you actually saw and that weren't cut away from.
Which I love that, not because I love violence. I mean, I do love film violence, but not because I love violence in real life, because sometimes it's so desensitizing just to see people getting punched all the time, consequences.
Or shot. Okay, that guy's gone.
And to see it for real, it's like, holy crap. And when that family gets wiped out as well, it's just terrible.
And it just ups the stakes so much for both the character and the movie as a whole. This is why Wolverine's so messed up. Because, come on, he has nice hands.
I mean, the Wolverine, the Origins film was not great at all, but the second one in Japan was just wonderful. And the extended version of that, which again is R-rated, adds some richness to the Japanese characters, because I think they must have cut it out because it was subtitled or something. And then that third one is just the trajectory of his standalone films is really impressive.
So here's the evidence that even as recently as last year when Logan came out, that films of this genre can be well written. They can be well written and deep and thoughtful and meaningful and well acted, and audiences get it as well as the visceral thrill. So it aggravates me so much that so many other movies of the genre are just sort of rolled out with the expectation, put it on and they will come.
I think it's because it's riskier to make that sort of film, isn't it? And the Marvel machine knows how to produce films that are going to make billions of dollars. And I think the film Logan, that could have been terrible. All of those choices could have failed.
But I think on a similar note, like Deadpool, which was also a huge financial risk, and a lot of people had to put their careers on the line. And of course, it was a hit, and so they're making a sequel. But just kind of piggybacking off your point, Jeremy. I do think it's because the Marvel machine is... I mean, there's time limits and there's monetary limits on what you can and cannot do. And it's the smaller movies like Logan and Deadpool that can actually risk things and try new things.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud or through Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, which are great places to let us know what you think of this episode or give us suggestions for future films to discuss or compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then, ka kite anō.